Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Come back, everyone, to our reading and commenting on this great book of Islam, the Risala of Imam al-Qushayri, rahimahullah. Picking up where we left off, we're on the bottom of page 27. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. We begin tonight with the biography of Abu Abdullah al-Harith al-Muhasibi. Al-Harith al-Muhasibi, famous early Sufi figure from Islam. He says, rahimahullah, he was unique in his age in regard to religious knowledge, pious, scrupulosity. I've kind of already talked about, it's not my favorite term, acts of devotion and mystical states. He came from Basra and died in Baghdad in the year 243. It is said that he inherited from his father the sum of 70,000 dirhams, but he did not take anything from it. It is said that this was because his father was an adherent of the doctrine of human free will. So, I just want to check the translation there, but when we talk about al-wara, we talked about that, I think, in the last class, about what he translated as scrupulosity, which is, I mean, that's kind of a funny word. But basically, that's an example of that I heard that there might be a problem. So with something, or there might be something that's questionable, so I'm going to stay away from it to be cautious. Yeah, see, his father كان يقول بالقدر, with not free will, but with destiny. So that is not the best translation, but basically this was an early movement. I'm just going to make a little note in my book that basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the creator of the events that will happen, or it's not like in Allah's knowledge, but that we create them ourselves, which ended up becoming, in a way, adopted in a modified form by the Mu'tazilites. Anyway, so his father belonged to that sect, or belonged to that belief. And so just continuing with the text, and he considered that it would be unscrupulous to take anything from his legacy. A sound report from the Prophet ﷺ says, people of two different religions do not inherit anything from one another. And that's in the science and in the discipline of inheritance law. That's the default ruling, is that we do not inherit across religions. So that is a known piece of law. So al-Muhasibi took that, and to show, I want to explain what this means, is that he's saying, out of safety, out of great caution, I'm not going to take my inheritance from my father because he didn't have a sound orthodox belief. So the point is that this is how serious these people took their commitment to the principles and the teachings of the deen. I heard from Muhammad ibn al-Hussein say, Al-Hussein ibn Yahya said, Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Nusayr al-Khuldi said, I heard Muhammad ibn Masruq say, when al-Harith ibn Asad al-Muhasibi died, he had not a single dirham. His father left him land and real estate, but he did not take anything from it. I heard that our master, Abu Ali al-Daqqaq, may Allah have mercy on him, said, whenever al-Harith al-Muhasibi extended his hand to a suspicious food, a vein in his finger would begin to move and he would abstain from it. And so if he would go like this to grab something to eat, and then because it was so internalized in him that he didn't want to eat anything that was questionable, like a vein or something, maybe in his index finger, like twitch or something like that. So he's like, oh, okay, I'm going to stay away from it. Abu Abdullah ibn Khafif said, follow the example of 5 of our masters and think well of the rest. They are Al-Harith al-Muhasibi, Junayd ibn Muhammad, Abu Muhammad Ruwaym, Abu al-Abbas ibn Ata, and Amr ibn Uthman al-Makki. They combine knowledge with mystical truths. I heard Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, may Allah have mercy on him, say, I heard Abdullah ibn Ali al-Tusi say, I heard Ja'far al-Khuldi say, I heard Abu Uthman al-Baldi say, Al-Harith al-Muhasibi said, he who has cleansed his inner self with self-observation and sincerity, God will embellish his external form with pious self-exertion and the following of the Prophet's Sunnah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you polish what's on the inside, and then it will manifest on the outside. It is related that Al-Junayd said, once I saw Al-Harith al-Muhasibi passing by. I noticed traces of hunger in his face. So I told him, Uncle, come into the house and have something to eat. And he agreed. I entered the house and searched for something to feed him with. At that time, there was in the house some food that was brought to me from a wedding party. So I took the food and gave it to him. He took a morsel of the food and rolled it in his mouth with the tongue several times. Then he stood up, threw it into the corridor, and left. When I saw him a few days later, I inquired about this, and he answered, I was hungry and wanted to make you happy by eating your food. However, there is between me and God a special sign. He does not permit me to eat any suspicious food. Therefore, he did not allow me to swallow that food. Where did it come to you from? Where did it come to you from? I said that it was brought to the house of a relative of mine from a wedding party. I asked him whether he would come in today, and he said that he would. I gave him a piece of dry bread, and we happened to have. He ate it and said, if you want to give anything to the poor, it should be something like this piece of bread. So again, there are people, and this is something that can happen, that you internalize a certain spiritual disposition, and then it is confirmed by your senses, right? So for him, his thing is, I'm not going to eat anything that's suspicious of being haram. Nothing that is either prepared in a haram way, bought for with haram funds, questionable in any way. Why is that important? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Atib mat'amak takun mustajab ad-du'a." Make sure that what you consume is halal, and Allah will answer your prayer. So eating halal food with all of its meanings, that the money that was used to buy the food is halal, that the food is etc. Eating that, consuming that is a cause of our dua being answered. So if you're really, really focused on that, then you will know that something questionable might have happened if your dua is not being answered. So for somebody like Al-Harith al-Muhasibi, radiallahu anhu, this was very much an internalized disposition. Abu Sulaiman Dawood ibn Nusayr al-Ta'i, the famous Dawood al-Ta'i, radiallahu anhu. He was a person of great importance. Sheikh Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, may God have mercy on him, told me, Abu Amr al-Matar told me, Muhammad ibn Musayyib told me, Ibn Hubayq told me, Yusuf ibn Sibat told me, Dawood al-Ta'i inherited 20 dinars and he ate from them for 20 years. So he basically used the dinar a year. I heard our master Abu Ali al-Daqqaq, may God have mercy on him, say, the cause of Dawood's conversion to asceticism was as follows. Actually, in the Arabic, it says tawbah. What caused him to repent and to follow the path. He used to wander the streets of Baghdad. Actually, no, in this case, it is his conversion to asceticism. I'm sorry, I was thinking of someone else. He used to wander the streets of Baghdad. Once he was passing through a street when a group of the bodyguards of Humayd al-Tusi pushed him away from Humayd al-Tusi. When Dawood noticed Humayd, he said, fee to the world in which Humayd takes precedence over you. So he secluded himself in his house and began to practice ascetic austerities and perform acts of devotion. Once I heard one of the poor say in Baghdad that the cause of his conversion to asceticism was that he heard a bereft woman whining, on which of your two cheeks have appeared the traces of decay, and which of your eyes has flowed out. It's a line of poetry. It is also said that the reason for his conversion to asceticism was that he attended the circle of Abu Hanifa, radiallahu anhu, who told him once, Abu Sulaiman, we have already prepared the required equipment. To which Dawood replied, so what else is left? Abu Hanifa answered, only works in accordance with it. So Dawood said, my soul prompted me towards seclusion. I told her, as long as you sit with them, you should not speak about any issue at all. So for a whole year, I was sitting with them, but I never spoke with any issue, about any issue. Sometimes issues would dawn upon me, and I would be as eager to discuss them as the thirsty man is eager to drink cold water, yet I would not talk. Thus he achieved what he achieved. So again, silence, speaking less, is one of the very, very important spiritual practices that unfortunately it's almost like impossible for people to do, because we have this desire to constantly speak. And of course, social media is an extension of speech as well. So we also kind of, that allows us to be able to speak in an easy way. But for Dawood al-Ta'i, radiallahu anhu, his secret was in his, like, okay, I do want to engage. And he was talking about engaging in legal discussions in the circle of Abu Hanifa. I mean, what could be more of a good thing to do? But he said, because it came from like this desire, I don't want any portion of my nafs to be a part of it. So it's the act of renouncing something that my nafs wants to do, that discipline, that's the transaction that was happening inside him for so long that he achieved this great spiritual state. Once Junaid al-Hajjam, sorry, the cupper from the Hijaz, al-Hajjam, cupped Dawood al-Ta'i. The latter gave him a dinar. Someone told him that was too much. He answered, he who has no manliness has no devotion to God. And he used to say during his night vigils, oh my God, my concern for you has annihilated all other mundane concerns, and now stands between me and my sleep. I heard Muhammad ibn Abdullah as-Sufi say, Muhammad ibn Yusuf told me, Sa'd ibn Amr told, Ali ibn Harb al-Mawsili told me, Ismail ibn Zayad al-Ta'i told me, Dawood al-Ta'i, wet nurse told him, don't you want to eat some bread? And he answered, between the chewing of bread and eating a mess of crumbled bread lies the reading of 50 verses from the Quran. So basically, if I eat a lesser form of food, I will save time. And the time that I would save would allow me to read 50 verses of the Quran. So he's so concerned with his time and time management, and how much time does it consume to cook a meal, to prepare a meal, to eat a meal, to eat different types of food. And he said, I'm going to eat that which is easier to eat, because I can save time, to do more of the Quran. Of course, there are people like that today in the dunya, people that are like, in the startup world, and these entrepreneurs who are achieving, outward success. You'll hear stories like that. They'll give up sleep, they'll give up food because it'll give them more time to code or to whatnot. But so I want you to think of that intensity, but directed towards these spiritual practices, to understand what's in the book. I'm not saying we have to do that, but the point of this is to show us these are the luminary early Sufis and how they lived their life. On the day Dawood died, one of the righteous saw him in a dream as he was running by. He asked him what happened to him, and he answered, I was just released from prison. When the man woke up from his dream, he heard people crying in the street, Dawood Ta'i has died. Someone asked him for an admonition, and he answered, a soldier of death awaits you. Someone came to visit him in his house and saw a jug of water standing right under the sun. He asked him why he did not want to put it in the shade. He answered, when I put it there was no sun. And later I was ashamed to show God that I want to walk for the sake of my soul's satisfaction. Meaning, khalas, it's just, I put it there and what happens, happens. Someone came to visit him in his house and he started to stare at him. Dawood told him, don't you know that they used to refrain from staring at one another as much as they refrained from excessive talk? So even just kind of like, staring at somebody, as he says, it's like a waste of energy. It's a waste of energy, just like talking excessively is a waste of energy. Abdullah bin Yusuf al-Isbahani told me, Abu Ishaq Ibrahim ibn Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Mazzaki told me, Qasim ibn Ahmed told me, I heard Maymun al-Ghazal say, I heard Abdul Rabi'a al-Wasiti say, I asked Dawood al-Ta'i to admonish me. He said, fast in this world, break your fast on death, and flee from people as if you are fleeing from the wild beasts. So this is kind of a common expression that's usually stated, divorce the world 3 times. Because we only get 3 divorces. So meaning, khalas, I don't want anything from this dunya. Not now and not later. And I'm not going to waste my time with people that are going to waste my energy. That's how you find spiritual success. Okay, you find spiritual success by you live in the world, you live in life, but you don't have to be of the world. Kind of like the traveler. That's what the Prophet ﷺ. Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib. Famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Be in this world as if you are a stranger. When you travel and you're transiting, if you have like a long flight somewhere, or if you gotta like have a pit stop somewhere, if you're driving a long distance and you like stop for gas and you stop for a rest house, you're not gonna live at the rest house. I mean, you go, you use the bathroom, you buy something, maybe you have to pray, so you find a place to pray, and then you move on because that's not your destination. So that's the attitude that these people had to their life in this world. Okay, Abu Ali Shaqiq ibn Ibrahim al-Balkhi, the famous Ibrahim al-Balkhi, radiallahu anhu. He was a Sufi master of Khurasan. He spoke a lot about trust in God, tawakkul, and he was a teacher of Hatim al-Asam. It is said that the cause of his repentance was as follows. So a lot of these people, you'll notice that they were not very good, and then they repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in their tawbah, they became these, exemplars. He was an offspring of a wealthy family. As a young man, he set out on a journey to the land of the Turks. Once he entered a sanctuary of idols, where he saw a custodian of the idols. His head and beard were shaved, and he was dressed in a purple robe. Shaqiq al-Balkhi told him, you have the Creator who is living, all-knowing, all-powerful. Worship him, and not these idols, who neither help nor harm you. The custodian answered, if this were so, then the Creator would be able to provide you with sustenance in your own country. Why did you take the pains to come here for trade? Shaqiq took heed and embarked on the path of world renunciation. Some said that the cause of his conversion to asceticism was as follows. He saw a slave boy who was playing around and rejoicing during a famine, whereas all other people were afraid of the famine. Shaqiq asked him, where does your liveliness come from? Don't you see that people are suffering from death and hunger? The slave boy said, what is this to me? My master has a rich village that produces all that we need. Shaqiq took heed and said, so his master has a village, and his master is but a poor creature, and yet he, the slave boy, is not concerned about his livelihood. How then can a Muslim be concerned about his livelihood when his master is so rich? Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I heard Sheikh Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, may God have mercy on him, say, I heard Abu al-Hussein ibn Ahmed al-Attar al-Balkhi say, I heard Ahmed ibn Muhammad al-Bukhari say, Hatim al-Asam said, Shaqiq ibn Ibrahim was a wealthy man who adhered to the ways of urban youth and kept company with them. At that time, Ali ibn Isa ibn Mahan was the ruler of Balkh, and he was fond of hunting dogs. One of his dogs got lost, and it was reported that it was taken by Shaqiq's neighbor. The ruler demanded that the man be brought to him. The neighbor ran away, took refuge with Shaqiq, and asked for his protection. Shaqiq came to the ruler and said, "Let him go. The dog is with me, and I will return it to you in 3 days." So he's just like made up this story just so he can save this guy. They let the man go, and Shaqiq went away worried about what he had done because now he's got to produce the dog in 3 days. On the third day, one of Shaqiq's friends who was away from Balkh returned there. On the way home, he found a dog with a collar and took it with him. He said to himself, "I shall give it to Shaqiq because he engages in chivalrous behavior." So he brought the dog to Shaqiq, who recognized it as the ruler's dog. He rejoiced at this and took the dog to the ruler, and thus was freed of his obligation. As a result, he came to realize his sinful condition, repented of it, and embarked on the path of asceticism. So it's, a lot of times these people, they'll have multiple stories about their tawbah. Sometimes all of the stories concurrently are true. There could have been multiple things that happened around the same time that caused the person to renounce. It is said that Hatim al-Asam said, "I was fighting the Turk side by side with Shaqiq on a day when one could see nothing but falling heads, broken spears, and shattered swords." Right? So this is in the thick of battle. Shaqiq asked me, "Hatim, how do you feel? How do you feel yourself on a day like this? Don't you feel as if it were the night on which you brought your newlywed wife to your house?" I said, "By God, no." And he said, "And I do feel myself today as I did that night." He then fell asleep in the middle of the battlefield, putting his shield under his head, and I could hear him snore. So complete reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shaqiq said, "If you want to know a man, consider what God has promised to him and what men have promised to him. Then consider to which of those promises his heart is more attached." Shaqiq also said, man's fear of God can be known from three things: from what he accepts, from what he rejects, and from what he says. Abu Yazid ibn Tayfur ibn Isa al-Bastami, the famous Abu Yazid al-Bastami, radiallahu anhu. His grandfather was a Zoroastrian who converted to Islam. He had three sons, Adam, Tayfur, and Ali. All of them were devotees and ascetics. He, Abu Yazid, died in the year 268, although some say 234. I heard Muhammad ibn Hussein, may God have mercy on him, say. I heard Abu Hassan al-Farisi say. I heard Al-Hassan ibn Ali say. Someone asked Abu Yazid how he acquired his knowledge of God, and he answered, by a hungry stomach and a naked body. Okay, so again, it's the renunciation. So the Salaf, their way was the way of renunciation. They were hungry, they skipped meals, they maybe once a day. Naked body meaning he didn't have many clothes. Not that he was obviously naked, because you have to clothe yourself, obviously. But he kind of like swore one garment or two at the most. That was kind of it. I heard Muhammad ibn Hussein, may God have mercy on him, say. I heard Mansur ibn Abdullah say. I heard Ammi al-Bastami say. I heard my father say. I heard Abu Yazid say. I have engaged in spiritual struggle and ascetic practices for 30 years and found that there is nothing harder for me than the knowledge of divine law and adherence to it. And were it not for the disagreement over the religious scholars, I would have remained where I was at the beginning, for the disagreement of scholars is the divine blessing, except in one issue, that is the understanding of God's uniqueness. It is said that Abu Yazid did not depart from this world until he had committed to memory the whole of the Quran. So the differences of opinion, of legal opinions, is a mercy for us, because we have an extremely robust plural legal tradition, very, very plural. I mean, all hosts of pluralities and flexibilities and malleability in Islamic law. And as he said, except when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So because at this time there were sects, theological sects, as we mentioned a couple of stories ago. So there's no mercy in that. That's what splits the community apart. But other than that, there is great mercy in the plurality of legal opinions that instruct our action and instruct our daily life. Abu Hatim al-Sijistani informed me, Abu Nasr As-Sarraj told me, he said, I heard Tayfur al-Bastami say, I heard the person nicknamed Ammi al-Bastami say, I heard my father say, Abu Yazid told me, let's go and see a man who was famous for his sainthood. And that person was indeed one who was often visited on account of his sainthood and was renowned for his asceticism. So we came to visit him. Visit him so we can benefit, and he can make dua for us as well. When the man left his house and entered the mosque, he spat in the direction of the Qibla. On seeing this, Abu Yazid turned and went away without even greeting him. And he said, this man cannot be trusted even as far as the observance of the manners of the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam are concerned. How can one trust him with other claims? This is because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, is that when you are in the mosque or when you are in prayer and you have something in your mouth and you need to spit, you spit on your right or you spit on your left, or you spit on your left or kind of right below you, but not in the direction of the Qibla. So it's a hadith. So he's saying, if the man who is supposed to be a saint or an ascetic can't even follow the most basic of sunnah, how can we follow him with anything else? And this is really, really important because, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the deen we're taking from people. So look to who you take the deen from. And if the person from whom you take your deen is not an example themselves of following the deen, then why would you trust anything else that they had to say? And that's very, very important because unfortunately that link we kind of gave up, or a lot of people give up. And people follow people who are popular or they like what they have to say or something like that. You got to look at the person's conduct. Like if you see me doing something haram, you're not going to trust me in all the other stuff I say. So I myself have to have a higher standard. I have to hold myself to a higher standard. I have to practice what I preach in public and in private. Most importantly in private. So I'm not a hypocrite, inshallah. And I ask Allah Ta'ala to help me in that endeavor always. But, I remember one time, people sometimes they come to the mashayikh and they like to ask them controversial questions. I remember one time somebody came to my sheikh and he asked about Sheikh Nazim al-Qubrusi radiallahu anhu. Sheikh Nazim, the famous Naqshbandi sheikh. And he said something along the lines like, we hear or we see videos, the sheikh does this, or he says that, he's like trying to create like fitna. And then my sheikh said, well, I only met Sheikh Nazim once when he had this massive conference in Washington, D.C., and he invited all these Muslim leaders. And when we prayed Salatul Fajr, he prayed the 2 rak'ahs of Fajr, and then he quickly lied down on his right side, got back up, and then we prayed Salatul Fajr. And he said there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to lie down between the Sunnah of Fajr and Salatul Fajr. So how can somebody who's holding to the Sunnah even to this level be, such and such as you claim? I never forget that answer. For 2 reasons. One, because it was a beautiful story, but 2, that's when I learned that Sunnah. And ever since I learned that Sunnah, alhamdulillah, I do that. It looks a little funny when people are not used to it because of why did you just lie down? But that's the Sunnah. Anyway, so the people that we follow, the exemplars that we follow, they are people that try to inculcate even the smallest amount of the Sunnah in their life. Okay. Abu Hatim as-Sijistani informed me, Abu Nasr as-Sarraj told me, he said, I heard Tayfur al-Bastami say, no, I think I read that. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Next paragraph. On the same authority as above, it is told that Abu Yazid said, once I intended to ask God to save me the trouble of caring about food and women. Then I said to myself, how can I ask God what the Messenger of God ﷺ never dared to ask? So I did not ask God for that. Then Allah Ta'ala, may He be blessed and exalted, protected me from the desire of women in such a way that I no longer cared whether there was before me a woman or a wall. So again, the holding on to the Sunnah, I'm not going to ask Allah something that the Prophet ﷺ didn't ask, even though we ask Allah all sorts of things that the Prophet ﷺ didn't ask because of the condition of our life. So there's nothing wrong with that. But look at how important that was for him. And because of that, Allah gave him what he had originally was intending to make dua for, which is to protect him from the fitna, you know, of desire and things like that. I heard Sheikh Abu Abdurrahman As-Sulami, may God have mercy on him, say, I heard Al-Hasan ibn Ali say, I heard Ammi al-Bastami say, I heard my father say. I asked Abu Yazid about his beginnings as a Sufi and about his asceticism. And he answered, asceticism has no rank. I asked him about how could this be? And he said, because I was in a state of asceticism for 3 days and left it on the fourth. On the first day, I renounced this world and everything in it. On the second, I renounced the hereafter and everything in it. On the third day, I renounced everything other than God. And on the fourth day, there was left nothing for me but God alone. So I fell into an ecstasy, and I heard a voice telling me, when you are with me, you have no power of your own. I cried, this is exactly what I want. Then I heard someone say, you have found it, you have found it. So this issue of asceticism, there really is no end to it. There's no end to the intensity. So, as I said, the Salaf, the early Sufis, their way was largely marked by asceticism, was largely marked by the renouncing of the world, of money, of food, of companionship, friendship, position, so on and so forth. Very extreme. I mean, obviously, from our perspective, very extreme. But one can make an argument that the the over consumption that we find ourselves in definitely is the cause of a lot of our spiritual ailments. So there is no rank in asceticism, meaning there's really no end to it. There's no end to what you can give up, because essentially you need to give up everything, meaning you need to give up your heart leaning towards anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he got to that point, all he saw was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that witnessing, that mushahada, these are terms that will come later in the book he'll define, was so intense that he kind of, he's like swooning, and he has this deep spiritual point where sometimes the feeling is overwhelming. So alhamdulillah, he found what he wanted in that renunciation. So there's no like degree of that. That's the goal. The goal is that you don't see anything, need anything, rely on anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's easy to say that when you have a lot. When you don't have anything and you say that and you actually believe it, that's where you have a real sense of your spiritual state is strong. Someone asked Abu Yazid, what is the most difficult thing you ever had to encounter on your way to God, meaning on your spiritual path? He answered, it is impossible to describe it. So someone then asked, well, then what was the easiest thing that you subjected your soul to? And he said, as for this, I called upon the soul to obey God, and she refused. Then I denied her water for 1 year, right? Which is the most intense thing I've ever heard of, right? But he said that's the easiest thing that I did. Abu Yazid said, for 30 years, I have been praying, and each time I prayed, I felt in my inner self as if I was a Zoroastrian who sought to cut his girdle. I heard yani like a thing that they would have to wear as like a distinguishing article of clothing, and kind of meaning that I'm trying to achieve this true state of submission. I heard Muhammad ibn Hussein, may God have mercy on him, say, I heard Abdullah ibn Ali say, I heard Musa ibn Isa say, my father told me that Abu Yazid once said, when you see a man who is endowed with miracles to such an extent that he can sit on the air, do not be deluded by him until you have tested his attitude towards what is permitted and what is prohibited, his observance of the legal rules and of the divine law. So extreme ascetic practices can lead to these type of miraculous feats. And this is something that's shared by all religions. It's not just something that we find in Islam. And you'll find, especially in the in the Indic world, you'll find yogis and practitioners of extreme Eastern traditions that have these type of like, you know, unbelievable physical feats. So he's saying that doesn't mean that that person is a saint. That's something else. What makes somebody a saint is their adherence to the Sharia, their adherence to the Sunnah of the Prophet, ﷺ. Whether they walk on water or they don't walk on water, walking on water doesn't mean anything. It just means that you have achieved a state through great asceticism. So that can happen. And this is an important teaching, but because the spiritual path for us is not about the miracles, it's not about those type of feats. For other people, that's a sign of somebody's kind of like sainthood, or they're like luminous. But that's for us a physical thing. Yeah, if you reduce your intake and you reduce the hold that the physical body has on the soul, you can hear things behind the wall, you can see things behind the wall. That can happen. But for us, that's a physical thing. That's not a metaphysical thing. That's not a spiritual thing. The spiritual thing is that I do the halal and I stay away from the haram. That every 5 times a day I stand and I pray without even having to be reminded. I have to pray and I never miss a prayer. That's what sainthood is made of. And so that's a very, very important uh, part of the story. Amir Bastami said on the authority of his father, one night Abu Yazid went to a hospice in order to recollect God's name on one of the walls of that hospice. Yeah, and he wanted to like find a quiet place to go. He stayed there until dawn without uttering a word. I asked him about this, and he answered, while there had passed through my mind a rude word that I once uttered in my childhood, and I was ashamed to mention God, may he be blessed and exalted. Which in itself is a way of remembering Allah Ta'ala, because you're so embarrassed uh, in the first place. Wanted to pause here before I do another one to see if there are any questions or comments. Maybe if there are not many, we can do the next story. But are there any questions or comments before I do the next story? What was the Prophet's practice to go hungry on a regular basis? Yeah, the Prophet went hungry on a regular basis. Remember, he ties stones to his stomach out of hunger. So that was a normal part of his life. He also had times when he ate, of course, and didn't fast. But going hungry or having periods of hunger and fasting was a normal part of the Prophet's life, and of all of the the leading Sahaba as well. It wasn't something that was just for the Prophet, and one of the reasons that was the case is that he never said no to anybody. So when people came and asked for assistance, he would give them from his food. So he gave away all of his food, and that's one of his unique qualities, and we know how to go hungry because we fast every month in Ramadan. So it's not like the feeling is not foreign. So there's nothing to be scared of, because you know that you're at some point you're going to eat, especially the part of the world that we live in and our community. I mean, no one's going hungry because they don't have. That's a different thing. But skipping a meal here and there, lightening the meal, trying to think about that, what we consume, is very, very important. Practice in asking tawbah. Well, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّهُ لَيُغَانُ عَلَى قَلْبِي وَإِنِّي لَأَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ فِي الْيَوْمِ مِئَةَ مَرَّةٍ. My heart becomes cloudy throughout the day, and I seek istighfar, I seek repentance from Allah Ta'ala daily 100 times. So, of course, the Prophet's istighfar is different than ours, because those are clouds of light, not of darkness, which is another meaning altogether. But nonetheless, we are always going to be saying astaghfirullah, because we're always going to be in a state of deficiency. So that's a daily practice, to at least do it 100 times in the morning and 100 times in the evening. Are there special occasions or significance in writing Surah At-Tawbah or special verses within it? I'm sure there is, but I don't have anything in my memory at the moment to that effect. I'd have to, look at like Ibn Kathir's tafsir. He'll probably say something like that in the beginning of the tafsir of Surah At-Tawbah. Some of the exalted hadith, some of the hadith that talk about the exalted nature of Surah At-Tawbah and when there are times to read it, inshallah. Okay, let me just try to squeeze in this next one, which is not that long, really just like a page and a half. Abu Muhammad Sahl ibn Abdullah at-Tustari, or the famous Sahl at-Tustari, radiyallahu anhu. He was one of the greatest Sufi masters. He had no peers in his age in regard to devotional acts and pious scrupulosity. He performed many miracles. He met the Nun al-Misri during the year when he came to Mecca on a pilgrimage. It is said that he died in the year 283, although some say that it was in 273. Sahl said, when I was 3 years old, I used to stay awake during the night watching my uncle Muhammad ibn Sawad perform his prayers. He kept vigil during the night. He used to tell me, "Go away, Sahl, and have a sleep. You are distracting me." I heard Muhammad ibn Hussein, may God have mercy on him, say, I heard that Abu al-Fath Yusuf ibn Umar the ascetic said, I heard that Abdullah ibn Abd al-Hamid say, I heard that Ubaidullah ibn Lu'lu' said, I heard that Umar ibn Wasil al-Basri recounted about Sahel ibn Abdullah that he told him, one day my uncle asked me, don't you remember God who created you? I asked him, how can I remember him? And he said, say by your heart as you move around in your clothes without however moving your tongue, God is my watcher. Or God is watching me. I said this for 3 nights. Then I told him about this, and he said to me, say this 7 times during the night. I said this, that he told then I then told him about this, and he said, say this 11 times during the night. I said this, and I felt the sweetness of this in my heart. Right? That right there, I felt the sweetness of that in my heart. That's one of the most beautiful experiences, is that when you do your dhikr and you feel like a physical like sweetness, sometimes you even feel like a sweetness in your mouth. You feel like, oh, did I eat something sweet? And you realize that that's the dhikr, or that you feel it in your heart. After 1 year, my uncle told me, keep on doing what I taught you and continue to do this until you enter your grave, for this will benefit you in this world and in the hereafter. I kept doing this for many years, and I felt the sweetness of this in my innermost heart. One day my uncle told me, son, how can a man with whom God is always present and whom he always watches and observes commit a sin? So stay away from sin. I used to seclude myself from people. Then my parents sent me to a Quranic school. I told them I fear that my internal concentration on God might dissipate. Make arrangements with the teacher so that I could come to him for a short while, study with him, and then come back. Yet he didn't want to board there. So I began to go to the school. I learned the Quran by heart when I was 6 or 7 years old. I was fasting constantly and ate nothing but barley bread until I turned 12 years of age. When I turned 13, I came across a problem and asked my family to send me to Basra so that I could inquire about it. I arrived in Basra and began to ask the local scholars about it. However, none of them was able to satisfy me. Then I left for Abadan in order to meet a man known as Abu Habib Hamza ibn Abdullah al-Abbadani. I asked him about this problem and he answered me. I stayed with him for a while, benefiting from his teaching and imitating his good manners. Then I returned to Tusta. There, my only meal consisted of a sack of barley that one could buy for 1 dirham, from which I made bread for myself, which I would ground and I would make bread for myself. Every night before dawn, I ate of this just once, without salt or seasoning. Thus, 1 dirham was enough for me for a whole year. I decided to fast for 3 nights and to break my fast on the 4th, then on the 5th, then on the 7th, then on the 15th. In this way, I spent 20 years, whereupon I began to roam the land until I again returned to Tustar. There, I used to stay awake all night, meaning all night in devotion. I heard Muhammad ibn Hussein say, I heard Abdullah ibn al-Baghdadi say, I heard Ibrahim ibn Firas say, I heard Nasr ibn Ahmed say, Sahel ibn Abdullah Tustari said, every deed that the servant of God performs without imitation, be it obedience to God or disobedience, is done to please his own self, whereas every deed that he performs in imitation of the Prophet ﷺ is painful to the soul. So if you do something without the intention that you're following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then it's useless. But when you do it out of imitation of the Prophet ﷺ, then you are away disciplining your soul. والله تعالى أعلى وأعلم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So we'll stop there for tonight. Questions? No questions? So, alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
My understanding is that next Friday is the 15th of Shaban, inshallah. So it's a good day to fast. And of course, the night before the 15th of Shaban, Thursday night, the eve of the 15th of Shaban, that's the night of dua and devotional works. So we will have a special program next Friday evening, because I think everyone there'll be iftar, and I'll make a cameo appearance. But I do not believe we will have class as such, but we will be together, inshallah, for that auspicious occasion.
Do you have common cold? Imam Tarek, do you have common cold? Have you cold?
No, maybe some allergies.
Okay.
Do you need a Sufi sheikh to prescribe a specific dhikr, or can your Imam prescribe dhikr, or can you just use a fortress of a Muslim? I mean, there are adhkar that the Prophet left us. The main book on that is the adhkar of Imam al-Nawawi, the book of remembrance of Imam al-Nawawi. Anything that goes back directly to the Prophet ﷺ, no one is in need of special permission, because we have permission from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do those adhkar. So those type of devotional acts and adhkar and dhikr that's what he left us. That's what the sunnah is. That was my whole point of those introductory classes, to help us understand that this is part of the deen. However, there are adhkar that are more specific, that are combinations of different things, especially some of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that each order has preferenced, a system of dhikr for spiritual advancement, which we'll get to when we finish the biography part of the book. That part is what requires, it be done with permission, and it be done under supervision. Because it's like taking medicine. You need to take the medicine from somebody who's prescribed it, who understands you and is observing you and making sure that there are no side effects and things like that. So those type of adhkar, yeah, you need permission to do that. But the stuff of the Prophets, like you said, Fortress of a Muslim, that's a book, just a very small book that's taking just a drop in the ocean of the adhkar of the Prophet ﷺ. But the main, one of the main resources is the book of Imam al-Nawawi, al-Adhkar, which every Muslim household should have that book, without question. And it's in English, and the English translation of the book is very good, because all of the adhkar are in English translation and transliteration. So that's the general stuff. And as I said, the more specific things related to an order, that is something that is dispensed by the sheikh or representative of the sheikh, so that it has the proper effect. Can I spell what? Kitab al-Adhkar by Imam al-Nawawi? Maybe I can't even find it. Okay, here's the entire PDF of the book. So I recommend that you download it as a minimum. Here is a PDF. Here is a link to the Amazon if you want to purchase it. Okay. Okay, so inshallah, everyone has a good weekend. I know there's some inclement weather, so you stay safe and dry and warm. And don't forget, if possible, to fast next Friday. To fast, if not able to, for whatever reason, at least the night before, Thursday night, to do the dua of the Nisf Shaban. I'll make sure that that's circulated, hopefully through the mosque email. I mean, it's a super short dua. It's not going to take you like 2 or 3 minutes, because this is the night that prepares us for Laylatul Qadr. This is the night that prepares us for Ramadan. It's an auspicious night. It's a night that the Salaf used to stay up in devotion. A common practice is to recite Surah Yasin 3 times, each time with an intention on that night. That's a spiritual practice that I do. I do that with the family. We read Yasin 3 times. And we do the dua of Laylatul Nisfa min Shaban. And if you're able to fast on Friday, great. But in any case, we will have this special event Friday at this slot for the Halaqa time.
And then Qiyam also, Imam Tarek, Qiyam also. Following that Friday, we have a Qiyam at 4 a.m.
Okay, but that's beyond Friday. Yeah, but Friday.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
I have a question, if it's okay still to ask.
Of course.
Can I still ask a question, or is it too late? Okay, so my question is, you mentioned the story about the water. So this person, he kept the water in the shade, and then the sun moved, and then he didn't want to take it up because he didn't want to put the nafs before that. So my question is, like, what was the intention when he put the water there? And why would he not use the same intention to move it to the shade?
The connection, I didn't get that. Can you restate your question?
No, his connection is not fine. It is, we can also say.
Sure. So my question is
his question. Naeem, you just repeat the question.
Sure. So my question is, so you mentioned about the story about the person who put the water in the shade, and then the sun. Yeah. Now my question is, so what was the intention in the first place, and why couldn't he use the same intention in the second time? And because he said that I don't want to put nafs between my moving it over, but he could use the same. So I'm just kind of curious to understand.
Okay, so I fill a pitcher of water, or a lot of us nowadays, we have something like this with just like a water flask. So I fill it with water, and I just place it on the desk or on the table. I mean, I got to put it somewhere. I'm not going to keep carrying it. I just place it somewhere. So that's what you do when you have a pitcher of water. You have to place it somewhere. And then later in the day, it happened that the place where he placed it, by the moving of the sun, the sun started becoming directly on it. And the purpose of putting water in a flask or a clay jug or something like that is for the water to be cool, so that you can drink cool water. So somebody's saying, well, why don't you move it away from the sun, because now the water is going to be warm. So to move that would be like to give the nafs pleasure of having cold water. And because he's so vigilant about his nafs, he's like, I'm just, that's the qadr of Allah, is at that moment the sun came on the jug, etc. So the first time there's no real intention, because that's what you do. Like if I'm walking around the house with these books, it's natural that I'm going to place them down somewhere. I'm not going to keep holding them like this the whole day. So it's automatic, is what I'm trying to say. So the placing of the jug wherever it was in the floor or in the room was an automatic thing. Maybe you can give like a modern example. Sometimes people will make a coffee in the morning, and like a mug of coffee, but like a big mug. And they'll start sipping on it, and then they'll get busy with email or something like that, and then the coffee would cool, you know. So a lot of people will take that coffee to the microwave to reheat it so that the coffee can be hot. So he would have just drank the coffee cold. So the point of the story is that, you know, I'm so vigilant over my nafs. I mean, I'm so vigilant over my nafs that, you know, I'm not even going to try to make that extra effort because I might have some joy in it. I'm just going to take it the way it is, as a way of self-discipline.
So would it have happened, just a follow-up question, would it have happened that if he made the intention that I'm going to drink this water so that it keeps me in a better state for the sake of Allah to worship more, would that have been something different then, in not necessarily in that situation, but
Yeah,
in a different situation?
that would be something different. The point of these stories, as I said in the beginning, is not that we follow the story verbatim. The point of the stories is to show us how people took their spiritual discipline seriously. So each one of us will manifest differently. For him, that's how it manifested. So the point is not to be obsessed with he was drinking hot water or something like that. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that he is observing his nafs and saw that he doesn't want his nafs to cave in on something like that, even if it's something that's small. Of course, having an intention, I'm going to drink the cold water because it's better for me, that's fine. That's a good intention. But that is to misread the story. So we're not here to look at the story and say, oh, this is like a sunnah, we have to follow it. No, we're just saying this is how somebody who's taking his nafs seriously is being vigilant.
So I wasn't thinking about following it directly, but I was just thinking like the derivative. But that's fine. Thank you so much.
Welcome. All right. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us, keep us safe, and to give us the tawfiq, you know, the grace and the stamina to finish this book. Once we finish the biographies, as I said, you know, we really begin the main part of the book, inshallah, which we'll get to soon. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون. Talk to you all soon. Be well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.